I got back from the store just before sunset, carrying a paper bag of milk aspirin and a small bundle of apples that were finally on sale. As I pushed open the front door, laughter spilled out. Strangers were in my living room, Vanessa's cousins, her brother, even her loud aunt, who smelled like hairspray and always sat with her legs spread wide like she owned the place. No one looked up when I entered. Matteo stood near the kitchen archway, pretending to scroll through his phone. I waited for him to say something, anything, but he kept his eyes down. I set the groceries on the counter, feeling like a guest in the house I had helped him buy. I said nothing that evening. I didn't know what words wouldn't crack in my throat. After the dishes clinked and the lights dimmed, Vanessa found me in the hallway. She didn't sugarcoat it. "We've given up the guest room," she said, folding her arms. "You can sleep on the porch couch for now." I opened my mouth, but nothing came. I just stared at her, at the woman who wore silk robes and called herself family, but never once offered to take me to my follow-up appointments. She walked away like it was settled. The blanket I kept folded neatly at the foot of the couch was now balled up in a plastic bag on the porch. I sat down slowly, feeling the wood creak under me. It used to be my favorite spot, quiet, breezy, good for evening tea. Now it felt like a ledge. I laid back, knees curled, the thin blanket pulled up to my chest. From inside, I could hear music, the buzz of conversation, someone opening a can. I stared at the ceiling beams above me, the same ones I picked out with Matteo at the lumberyard. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to keep from crying. The next morning, my name wasn't on the coffee mug anymore. A month before the porch, before the plastic bag, before the eyes that refused to meet mine, I had signed the house over. Matteo said it was temporary, just for the loan paperwork, he assured me. "You'll always have a place here, Mama." I believed him. I remember sitting at the bank, my knees still stiff from surgery, holding the pen, while Vanessa smiled wide like it was a wedding. She called me the key to their future. I should have known then what kind of lock I was handing them. The guest room was meant to be mine, just until my hip healed. A soft bed, a small window. But now it's occupied by Vanessa's uncle, a man with a loud laugh and louder opinions. He leaves beer cans on the dresser and food wrappers on the nightstand. I once asked if he could take his shoes off inside. He laughed and said, "I'm family. I wash their dishes after dinner, wipe down their greasy countertops, refill the toilet paper. No one replaces. They eat, first talk loud, and forget I'm there. I take my plate once the table's been cleared, quiet like a ghost at her own funeral. Mail still arrives every afternoon, and I still check it out of habit. Electric bill water notice flyers for a nail salon, all addressed to Matteo Duarte or Vanessa C. Nothing for Selena, no doctor reminders, no pharmacy notes, no letters from friends. I'm not on anything. One afternoon, I stood at the mailbox and looked up at the porch. A new welcome mat read, "The Duartes." No mention of me. Later, while folding a dish towel, I heard Vanessa laugh behind a closed door. "She thinks this is still her house," she said to someone. Cute. I folded the towel again, slower this time. That night, I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept my receipts. They were all there, folded, chronological, labeled by date. One envelope at the bottom was heavier than the rest. The next morning, before anyone else was up, I tucked the envelope under my arm and walked to the library. It was still early, dew clung to the grass and my hip ached with each step. But I needed answers. Inside, the printer hummed as I pulled up every transaction related to the house. The title, history, mortgage agreements, utility setups. I laid the pages out across a table, one by one, circling dates and signatures. Mine was only on the original purchase, not the transfer. Because deep down, I never signed that final deed Matteo gave me. Vanessa had asked me about it 3 times. "The bank needs the updated version," she said, "just for the file." Each time I said I'd look into it. Each time I folded the paper and slid it back into the drawer. My husband used to say, "Never give up land without a way back." Paper doesn't bleed, but it holds power. At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I knew better. I called Raina from a quiet corner. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she picked up on the first ring. "You free for coffee?" I asked. We met at a diner down the road. She looked older, but her eyes were still sharp. I handed her the folder. She read everything without a word. Then she smiled. "It's still yours, Selena. They don't know that, do they?" I shook my head. "They think I gave it up." Raina tapped the corner of the deed. "Then it's time you remember that you didn't." I walked back home in silence. Vanessa's car was gone, but Mateo's truck was in the driveway. Inside, the house smelled like takeout and dirty laundry. I headed toward the hallway to grab fresh clothes, but when I opened the linen cabinet, mine weren't there. Someone had tossed them into a clear storage bin shoved beneath the stairs. Next to it was a sticky note. "Don't touch sorting for donation." I closed the lid gently. Then I went to the kitchen drawer and reached for the pen I never used until now. I found Mateo alone in the kitchen the next evening, standing at the sink, rinsing a glass without soap. It was the first time we'd been in the same room without Vanessa in days. "Can we talk?" I asked. He didn't look up, but he didn't say no either. "I have a doctor's appointment coming up," I said. "A follow-up for my hip. I haven't slept well." He wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Vanessa's family is just here until they get on their feet." I waited, thinking he would add anything to acknowledge me. But he didn't. "I need somewhere to rest," I said softly. He gave a half shrug. "There's always the couch." I stared at him. That's not a place to heal Mateo. His jaw moved, but his eyes never met mine. He reached for the pantry like the conversation was over. I went back to the porch that night and sat in the dark. My bones ached from the cold. The cushions smelled like mildew. I pulled my cardigan tighter and tried to breathe through the knot in my throat. Inside, through the half-open window, I heard Vanessa laughing. Her voice carried. "She thinks this is still her house," she said, "and whoever was on the other end must have laughed too. Give it a week." I didn't move. I just sat there, hands folded in my lap, like I was in church trying to keep from shaking. At dawn, I opened the back door to get my toothpaste. The bathroom was locked again. On the porch table sat a clear plastic bag, my shampoo toothbrush, a comb I've had since I was 20. No note, just the bag, just the message. I carried it inside past Mateo snoring on the couch and placed it back in the drawer where it used to live. Then I opened the shed behind the house and took down the locked tin box I'd hidden long before any of them moved in. It was late afternoon when I got back from my walk. I'd taken the long way through the neighborhood, circling past houses, with kids on bikes and women watering their front lawns. The kind of peace I thought I was moving toward when I sold the land and the truck and the stall. But when I reached the front door, my key didn't fit. I tried again, jiggling the lock, thinking maybe the wood had swollen from the humidity, but the metal was smooth and new. I knocked. Mateo opened it halfway. His face was tight, like he'd rehearsed this moment. "We're reorganizing," he said. I kept my voice steady. "You mean you're locking me out?" He hesitated. "No, just setting some boundaries." Boundaries. I looked past him. The living room was full of shoes that weren't mine pillows I hadn't bought a dog I'd never seen. "I need my coat," I said. He closed the door without a word and returned a minute later with a puffer jacket, one I hadn't worn since winter, and handed it to me like a delivery. That night, I unlatched the shed. The old quilt I'd kept for emergencies was folded in a milk crate. I laid it on the floor, pulled a tarp over it, and sat with my knees tucked under my chin. Inside the house, someone played music loud enough to cover conversation. The windows glowed gold behind closed blinds. I remembered the day we installed those windows. Mateo had insisted on double pane. I paid extra so they'd last longer. I stared up at the roof I'd chosen from a catalog, the one with the slate gray shingles that wouldn't show mold or rain stains. The siding, I'd painted it myself. The foundation, I wrote our initials in it with a stick before the concrete dried. And now I was here watching it all from a garden shed. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out Raina's card. The ink had smudged from sweat. I straightened it, took a breath, and dialed the number. Raina picked me up just after 8. She brought coffee in a paper tray and didn't ask how I'd slept. I was grateful for that. We drove downtown, parked near the county office, and walked up the steps in silence. The building was too cold, the lights too bright. But the clerk behind the window was kind. She typed in the address. Her nails were red and chipped. I watched them click the keyboard like a metronome. Still under Selena Duarte, she said. No transfer filed. No lien on file either. I exhaled through my nose. Raina handed me a form, and I signed a quiet affidavit of ownership. Then another, a clause that would require all residents not named in the title to vacate upon formal notice. It was just paper. But this one bled. We left with copies. Raina offered to drop me off somewhere for lunch, but I said I'd walk home. I needed time to feel my feet again. The sun was high when I reached the porch. Vanessa's cousin was asleep on the swing, his foot twitching like a child's. I walked past him, opened the screen door, and stepped into the kitchen like nothing had changed. No one was home. I pulled out the cast iron skillet and baked cornbread, the kind Mateo used to love when he was little. I sliced it into squares, left it on a plate on the porch table, and wiped the counter clean. I didn't say a word. That evening, as I folded laundry in the shed, my phone buzzed. A message from Mateo. Vanessa says, "Tell her to stop pretending she lives here." I read it twice. Then I deleted it and kept folding. The next morning, I mailed the first envelope. Certified return receipt requested. 1 copy to Vanessa, 1 to Mateo, 1 taped to the inside of the shed door. The house was quiet when I slipped back inside. I poured coffee into my chipped mug and waited. 2 weeks passed without a word from either of them. I kept my distance, cooked quietly, slept in the shed. I moved like smoke through the edge of my own life, leaving no trace, no complaints, no noise. Then the courier came. I wasn't home when he arrived, but the neighbors told me later he wore a blue blazer, carried a clipboard, and asked for signatures. 1 envelope for Mateo, 1 for Vanessa, and 1 sealed and bold taped directly to the front door. Notice to vacate 30 days by order of legal counsel. Vanessa's scream shook the windows. It was the kind of scream you only hear when entitlement meets reality. I'm told she threw a shoe. Mateo tried to calm her, but his hands were shaking. Her uncle punched a dent into the hallway wall next to the thermostat I installed with Mateo, back when he still called me Mama. By the time I returned, the house was quiet. The envelope had been torn down, but I saw the tape residue still clinging to the doorframe. I didn't go inside. I had spent the morning at Raina's office, seated across from her polished desk, sipping lemon tea and reviewing the final paperwork. The reclamation motion was dry clinical, but my name was everywhere on it, bold, unshakable. I signed the last page with a steady hand. Raina gave me a quiet nod. 30 days. After that, it's yours in full force. As I walked back toward the house, I could feel it, not just the ownership on paper, but something heavier returning to me, weight in my steps, my spine straightening. I passed the dent in the hallway wall. Vanessa's voice was nowhere. Mateo's shoes were by the door, but he didn't come out. I didn't wait for them. I went into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and took out the spare mailbox key. Then I walked down to the post office and updated the forwarding address to my full name, written clearly, line by line. The sky was overcast when I arrived with the sheriff's deputy. I didn't knock. I didn't have to. The deputy walked ahead of me, boots solid on the porch boards. He carried the paperwork under one arm, the official seal visible through the envelope window. When he opened the door, no one stopped him. Inside the house was strangely still. The guest room was empty, no more beer cans, no laughter. The hallway was quiet. I could smell lemon cleaner and something else beneath it, urgency. Most of Vanessa's family had already gone. Vanessa herself stood in the middle of the living room, red-faced fists clenched. Mateo sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, eyes locked to the floor like he might fall through it. The deputy cleared his throat and unfolded the paper. His voice was even rehearsed. "You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Ms. Selena Duarte retains full legal ownership of the property as of this date." Vanessa spun toward Mateo. "Do something." He didn't move. "She jabbed a finger at me. She manipulated this. She tricked you." Still, he said nothing. I watched him for a moment, my son, my only child. His face, pale mouth pressed into a thin line. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not triumph. Just stillness. I walked past them both straight into the kitchen. The skillet was in the sink, untouched. I drained it, rinsed it, and hung the towel carefully over the handle like I used to. Then I reached for the light switch and turned it off. The hum of the refrigerator softened. The overhead fan slowed. I stood in the silence and let it settle in my bones. Outside, the deputy was already noting the timeline. Vanessa's voice followed me down the hall, shrill, angry, echoing in a house that no longer belonged to her. I closed the back door gently, then sat on the porch swing as the clouds shifted above me. The wind had changed. I could feel it in my chest, and somewhere inside the walls finally exhaled. 2 days later, his shoes were gone from the doorway. No goodbye. No note. Just a pile of laundry he didn't bother folding, and a scraped-up phone charger coiled like a question mark on the table. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Not out of heartbreak. Just stillness. The quiet didn't sting anymore. It just was. I opened every window in the house. Let the air move. Let the heat and noise and dust from their presence lift out into the yard like something finally released. Then I called a contractor. Something light, I said. Something clean. He offered swatches, but I didn't bother with names. I pointed to the one that felt like breathing again. That afternoon, I took down the heavy curtains Vanessa had insisted on. "They make it feel elegant," she'd said. But they'd always blocked the morning light. I folded them once, twice, then dropped them in a donation bag without ceremony. From the pantry, I pulled a tin I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the dried herbs my mother used to burn whenever we moved to a new place. Not rosemary, something older, sharper, woodier. I didn't know the name, just the way the smoke curled upward like a memory and left behind a scent that smelled like starting over. I lit a pinch of it in a metal dish on the kitchen counter and let it burn. The shed was nearly empty now. I only kept what mattered. In a shoebox tucked under the bench, I found the photo me in front of my truck hair, pulled back the day I signed it over. I was smiling, but the lines around my eyes said something else. I wiped the dust off with my sleeve and slipped it into a frame I hadn't used since Mateo's graduation. I placed it on the windowsill facing inward. By evening, the house no longer echoed, and for the first time in months, I slept in my own bed, door, locked blinds, open moonlight on the wall. The air feels different now. It's not just the open windows or the paint drying in the hallway. It's the way my shoulders don't stay tight when I walk through the door, the way I exhale without meaning to. I moved back into the main bedroom last night, changed the linens, opened the closet, smiled at the scarf I thought I'd lost. I slept through the night, the good kind of sleep, the kind that doesn't ask for dreams. This morning, I called Raina, just to say thank you. She laughed. "You sound taller," she said. "Maybe I am. I volunteer now twice a week at the community center. I teach a short class on property basics, deeds, titles, what not to sign, when someone smiles too wide and says, "It's just a formality." Mostly women come, some older, some young, all of them tired of being overlooked. Last Thursday, I told them to keep 2 copies of everything. One in the house, I said, and one where no one else knows to look. A neighbor I barely knew dropped off a basket of tomatoes this morning. Said she had extras from her garden. I said thank you and gave her a jar of pickled onions I'd made months ago, but never opened. She smiled like I'd handed her something sacred. There's still a dent in the porch railing where Vanessa's uncle lost his temper. I see it every time I sit out here. I haven't fixed it yet. I will. Just not today. Today I stood barefoot in the kitchen's sunlight, cutting across the tiles, and poured myself coffee into the chipped ceramic mug. The one with the faded blue line around the rim. The one that always made the coffee taste like home. I drank it slowly. No rush. No noise behind me. Just me, and the sound of birds outside the window, and the hum of a house finally breathing with me instead of against me.